Well, we know that there's going to be some issues in terms of distribution and the time it gets to people. But from a psychological standpoint, I think it gave the country the impetus to what was already starting to happen with the oncoming administrative changes, and that is that we're going to get through COVID. Our death rate has been low. The stuff will open up that hasn't been opened up before. Stimulus will be passed. So the vaccine news was sort of the icing on the optimistic cake that we were already experiencing. And yes, it will make a difference, absolutely. Whether half the country gets the vaccine or not is irrelevant. It's all the psychology and that herd mentality. Well, there's three reasons. One is that yields have been actually rising, which is good for the banks when the yields go up. Two is that the regional banks in particular are very tied into oil and gas, and actually oil and gas have been going back up after floundering near the lows. The crude oil market has gone up. And then on the third part is again going back to if the economy is going to reopen, then we may actually start to see more robust action in banks with people borrowing money to buy houses or refinance mortgages or start businesses or the things that they haven't been able to do or have been hesitant to do because of COVID. So yeah, the banks are a great reflection. And just from a cyclical standpoint, they were so hammered and so underperforming the rest of the market that it was just a natural way for people to put money. Well, I think that you can have some impact from a political standpoint if you add more regulations. But most of the oil companies, they've all come out with statements that they are actually trying to advance themselves into clean energy. No one's going to doubt the future is clean energy and that oil is just a matter of time when it goes to the wayside. But the reality right now is that it's still very much economically an oil and gas economy, not just here in the United States, but in many other countries around the world, China included. And so as such, with consumption coming back, or at least the perception that consumption's coming back, that's good for the oil and gas for now. And of course, the alternative energy space got extremely saturated, so that has sold off with the money rotating. But in the long term, I wouldn't really worry too much what Biden says or doesn't say or what he passes or doesn't pass. It's going to be a natural attrition and it's inevitable, and it would be good for everyone to plan for that future. I think that the rotation right now, barring anything unforeseen, like right now we know that the election is being contested in the United States, but I think that mostly the market is sort of dismissing that because they're just allegations. Nothing has been substantiated in terms of voter fraud. So short of that coming to fruition and people now doubting the entire voting system in the United States, I think that we are going to see this rotation continuing, and not only into the end of 2020, but as we get into 2021, especially with a stimulus package right behind that. I think that people will be continuing to buy small cap growth stocks, small cap stocks, transportation, retail, and yes, possibly some old-fashioned energy, which of course with airlines now starting to say that they're going to start flying again and very encouraged by the vaccine news will also help the traditional oil and gas. Well, I'll tell you one thing on the dividend. We do not buy a stock because of a dividend. That is a dangerous slope. A perfect example is Pfizer. My mother, I'm just going to use her as a great example. She's been in Pfizer forever, and she's been underwater in terms of the returns on the stock, but she gets her small dividend every month. That doesn't really make sense to us as traders. We want to make money on the actual instrument and not on the fact that we're going to get some kind of dividend. But with that said, I think like you approach everything, you should look at the different sectors and make decisions not just based on the dividend, but do you think the sector is something that can grow? And then how long do you want to be in that particular instrument collecting the dividend? So like, for example, IBM might be a good place to look for a company that's been bottoming out and offers a dividend. If you're looking at the oil and industry, Valero, I think Occidental Petroleum, a couple of those companies offer some dividends. I don't claim to be an expert and off the top of my head which companies do have dividends, but I will say that it behooves anybody, especially listening to this show, is interested in investments, is to know pretty much where the stock is trading and not just focus on the check that you're going to get every month, because it could be blind. It could be very small thinking. You could be losing a lot more money in your portfolio as a result. Gridlock is a sort of complicated issue. The optimistic side of the gridlock is that some of the policies that the Biden administration said they would do, like raising corporate taxes, within a Republican Senate may not go through so readily. Some of the deregulations that Trump administration put in that Biden might try to lift unless he can do an executive order also could be blocked. And that companies will like that. The stock market will like that. But on the other hand, I would love to see an infrastructure package, or I would like to see what happens with the health care. These are the kinds of things that can come back and haunt an administration when there is gridlock. And really, who suffers in the end but the American people, because an infrastructure package is desperately needed. Some type of cohesive health care plan desperately needed. So these are the kinds of things that may not necessarily affect the market, although infrastructure would be good if it got passed, but definitely affects the American people. So the market will tell you what the story is, how concerned or unconcerned it is with some kind of a gridlock House, Senate, and President. We'll see.